Lindsay, I appreciate the invitation. And thank you to everyone that attended. We had a really good response, and I recognized so many names. And I just want to thank you guys for your support of the podcast and for joining us today. Hopefully this will be helpful. So I kind of tailor-made this. So let me share my screen first and foremost so that you guys can see. Where is the, all right, can you guys see my screen? Okay. Awesome.
Yes.
Awesome. All right, well, let's get my face off there. And I am not going to do any further introductions about myself because Renee did an awesome job, and Lindsay. So what I really want to do is I want to kind of start at the very beginning and just pretend that we're like really at square one when it comes to the decision to engage in a job search for an MSL position. Okay. And if you are an MSL already and you're on this webinar, there's going to be plenty of information that's going to be relevant to you as well. So this isn't just for aspiring MSLs, but also for current MSLs as well. But the first thing that I always like to do when I'm speaking to someone that's interested in the MSL career is I really want to know, and I want you to be sure that you're 100% confident that you want to be an MSL, that you know what an MSL does, that you've done the research, and that this is the right position for you. Very often I'll be dealing with somebody and working with somebody that learns throughout the process that maybe this isn't the right position for them. So here's where I think we should start. Let's talk about the 5 most common things that we see as MSL recruiters on job descriptions. Okay. So first and foremost, most times our clients are looking for an advanced scientific degree. So that's probably PharmD, MD, PhD. It might even include a DO, an NP, and a PA. And I get the question all the time, what are my chances of landing an MSL position if I don't have a doctorate level degree? Well, about 80% of the jobs, the medical science liaison positions that are posted require a doctorate degree. So it's not impossible. There are jobs out there for folks that don't have the D degree or the terminal degree, but your chances are less. The other thing that my clients ask for are specialized scientific expertise. So if, let's just say they specialize in oncology, that's going to be something that very often is going to be required. You need to check that box in order to apply for the position. Otherwise, they're not going to consider you. Strong verbal and written communication skills, mandatory. You have to have it to be an MSL. It's not the same as having experience and the ability to present in front of individuals as well as groups. It's 2 different things. You can be a good communicator, you could speak well, and you could have excellent written communication skills, but do you have the ability to stand up in front of a group, sometimes a large group, and present? And that's a big piece of it, and it's going to be a part of the interview process. And are you willing to travel? A lot of people say to me, well, I'm limited in the amount of travel that I can do. My geography, I can only travel this much. Well, that's going to limit you in your ability to consider an MSL position or to be considered for an MSL position. So these are the 5 most common things that that we see and things that we have to kind of keep in mind to check these boxes when we're looking for MSLs for our clients. So going back, think about that. Why do you want to be an MSL? Do you check these boxes? Is this in line with what you want? Do you feel like you have the characteristics and the skills to check, enough of these boxes to be considered? The other thing that's important too is that you are probably going to be asked on an interview, what does an MSL do? So you really need to be prepared to answer that question and answer it succinctly so that the person that's interviewing you is going to know that you understand what it is that you're signing on for. So keep those two things in mind. Be prepared to answer the question, why do you want to be an MSL? And be prepared to answer the question, what does an MSL do? So when we start a job search, whether it's like you're brand new in your career or whether you have 10 years of experience, you really want to revisit your resume or CV. It's really important that, let me just hide these. I still have all your faces up. It's really important that you're comfortable with your resume, the current resume, and the version that you have in place for the position that you're going to be pursuing. So I recently did a couple of webinars and podcasts on this. So I'm not going to spend that much time on this. If you're really looking for comprehensive information, check out my podcast on resume writing. It's pretty comprehensive. But what I will say is it's not a bad idea to start by asking friends if maybe they can either take a look at your CV or maybe they can share their CV so that you can see what they might have done. If you like their template versus the template that you're using, it's not a bad place to start. I always tell people, try to get as many outside opinions as you can. And, you know, if you have peers that are in industry or, you know, MSLs or recruiters, I would definitely check with them to make sure that you're not missing anything. A couple things that I cover in the podcast that I think are important is you really want to make sure that your resume has the right keywords on it. Okay, so that would be search terms and proper phrases that are in line with the job description of the position that you're interested in. So we call that matching. You look at the search terms or you know, keywords that appear on the job description, and you try to incorporate that into your resume as best you can based upon what your experience is. The other thing too is a lot of people ask me, you know, how do I get my resume through the applicant tracking system? Well, to start, one of the things you want to do is you want to make sure that it's not too funky and too creative. Applicant tracking systems don't pick up tables, text boxes, vertical text, logos, images, graphics, columns, headers, footers, less common fonts or uncommon sections. So that means that if you have this creative resume with your photo on it and there's like a column on the left and then there's text boxes and there's a lot of stuff in the header, there's a lot of stuff in the footer, none of that stuff is going to actually get through the applicant tracking system. But this is a really important part of the process. Make sure that you're 100% comfortable in your resume or CV before you start your search. You know, I mentioned this when we were talking about the 5 important things that you see on MSL job descriptions, but your scientific expertise and your scientific focus is huge. You really want to highlight what I call your scientific value proposition. So that means that if you have 5 years of oncology research or you've been working in the neuroscience field, you want to highlight that. You want to make sure that you show potential employers and recruiters that you're an expert in a certain space. So now this is going to give you leverage for that position over somebody that may just be more general. The other thing too is if, for example, you're an expert in oncology, don't apply to a diabetes position. Stick within, you know, your field of expertise. And I know that that sounds so obvious, but I can't tell you how many times I see it happen. So just be careful, be very specific and really work on, you know, if you do have a very specific focus, continue to develop that because that's really going to help you in your job search. It's absolutely mandatory to have strong communication and presentation skills. I could tell you that you're going to be tested on this, you know, in the interview process, but you're going to be tested on this when you become an MSL. So it's important to put this on your CV and your resume. And you can't just say excellent verbal and written communication skills. I mean, everybody says that. You want to show proof. So you want to list presentations, publications, abstracts, posters, speaking engagements. And also if you attended any training, if you conducted or, were part of any kind of mentoring programs, or if you had a mentor, add all that stuff, because it shows that extra effort, and it'll show an extra commitment to the role. A lot of people say to me, Tom, you know what? I don't have a lot of stuff that I can put on my CV. What do I do? Well, you need to seek out opportunities to present. And I know that's not easy, but there's ways to do it. There's community functions, Toastmasters, there's networking groups out there. I mean, what Renee and Lindsay are doing right now is taking an initiative and getting up in front of peers, and this counts. This is along the lines of what you would need to do to be an MSL and be a good communicator, and get up in front of a group and speak. And I know it's a little bit different, but it absolutely does count. So this is where you might have to get creative a little bit, but it's important. I'm a big LinkedIn guy. You guys probably know me from LinkedIn. A lot of you guys have seen me on there. If you haven't connected with me yet, I invite you to do so. LinkedIn is, as much as I said that your CV or your resume is the cornerstone of your job search, LinkedIn might be the cornerstone of your career. I think it's really important that you make your LinkedIn profile as perfect as you possibly can. It's your digital brand. I recently did a podcast on LinkedIn. I think it was really good. I'm going to continue to provide tips and tools and ideas, both through the podcast. And just so you guys know, MSL Talk is now on Instagram and YouTube. So we don't have a lot of content yet, but follow us on Instagram, follow us on YouTube, because I'm going to be putting a lot of video out with a lot of tips and suggestions. And one of them is actually 6 important LinkedIn profile tips, is actually my first video. So, and basically where you want to start is you really, really want to make sure you have a current and professional photo, and that banner that you have that accompanies your photo. Make sure it's professional, make sure it's current. You don't want a photo that's informal. Try to get a professional headshot done if you can. Do not, under any circumstances, put a picture of you in your cap and gown. People don't want to hire you as a student. They want to see what you're going to look like in the professional, working there. So you want to get away from that. I mean, that's actually my advice. But I can tell you, I see what my employers look for, and I definitely think you have to make it more professional than informal. You want to consider doing a detailed headline versus a job title. And what that means is, instead of just putting a title underneath your profile picture, it gives you the ability to actually do a detailed headline. Mine's like 15 words. It's like expert medical affairs, MSL recruiter, dedicated to pharmaceutical, but it's like 15 words. So feel free to get descriptive as to what you may want to do. And maybe it says something like, oncology clinical pharmacist, seeking transition to industry as a medical science liaison. I mean, that could be a good headline for one of you guys. When your resume is 100% up to date, you want to take the information on that resume and you want to mirror and match that resume information to your LinkedIn profile. Both of them have to look the same. Me and my recruiters, we will actually look and we'll compare to see if they match up. And employers are going to do the same thing. If there's inconsistencies, it's really going to kind of work against you. Use keywords and search terms in your profile and skills section, very similar to what I talked about matching with your resume. Is you want to make sure that you have those same search terms and keywords in your profile. Now you should, because if you're matching your resume to your profile, that should transfer over. So you should be fine, but make sure that you do that. Don't forget to add your contact info. A lot of times I might connect with somebody and I'll go to send them an email and I'll hit the contact info bar and there's no info in there. So recruiters want to call candidates. We want to email candidates. Can I send you an email? Can I send you a direct message? I can, but I might want to send you a job description. So make sure you incorporate your contact info. And you also want to select open to opportunities. Now, the way you do that is you go to your profile. I think it's like the me icon in your profile, and you go to settings, and then you have to select a box that says open to opportunities. You might have to navigate around a little bit to find it, but I would definitely do that. Keep in mind that your employer is not going to see that you're open to opportunities. So wherever you list as your employer, they're not going to be able to see that. So just a couple of LinkedIn profile tips. Now, as far as how to use LinkedIn, there's a couple of things that I recommend. Number one, I think it's really, really important to build your network. We talked about this on my podcast, but I can't stress it enough. You need to, I mean, literally every day, every time you meet someone, speak to someone, communicate with somebody, transact business with somebody, you need to look for them on LinkedIn and connect with them. And I'm going to tell you why it's going to become more apparent later in this conversation, but this is going to be your network. You know, back in the day when a million years ago, when I started my career, I was a pharmaceutical sales rep and I had a Rolodex. A Rolodex was something you put on your desk. It was like a little file system and you had like, you put all your business cards in there. And I know that sounds silly and I know it's very dated, but your LinkedIn network is like your digital Rolodex. So what you want to do is you want to go to everybody that you went to school with, everybody that's in if you're in a residency program or postdoc, or I mean, literally everyone that you could possibly think of, you want to connect with and build up your network. You definitely want to try to build up your network within medical affairs. So as you get to meet people, you meet MSLs and, you know, you definitely want to send out a personalized connection request. And what I mean by that is, you know, don't just hit the connect button. You want to add a note and you want to give them, you know, a personalized message of why you're connecting, and don't make it long. One of the things that really turns people off is when they get this huge message and they're like, oh my God, I can't read all that. People are busy, respect their time. I always say, if you can get a referral to somebody that you're really looking to connect with, if you can use like the name of a mutual colleague, or reference something that might be of interest to that person. If you went to the same school, if you're from the same town, if you see some kind of interest on their profile, mention that. So the note might look like this. Dear Jane, Tom Caravela suggested I reach out in hopes that we can connect. I really enjoyed your recent LinkedIn article or post and found it very informative. I am an oncology clinical pharmacist seeking a transition to an MSL role and was hoping to join your network on LinkedIn. Thank you in advance for considering my request. Have a great day. Short, simple, to the point. You use someone's name. You mention something that might be of interest. You know, something like that. I just noticed a typo too. Anyway, I'll have to fix that. But this sort of thing goes a long way. And I think you should, you know, make a practice of, or maybe make a goal of how many LinkedIn connections you want to get a day or a week or a month. You know, maybe it's 5 or 10 a day. Maybe it's 25 or 50 a week. I mean, oh, that sounds pretty lofty, but not everybody's going to accept every request. But you want to, after the course of a year, you want to have 500, 600, 700 connections. And then each year that you go in your professional career, you're going to add to it. So really, really important. So now there's your LinkedIn profile, there's your LinkedIn network, and then there's LinkedIn engagement. This is really important. There's another really important part of things. So again, I mentioned it before, I'm going to mention it again. You want to be active in the medical affairs community on LinkedIn. And the way you do that is start joining MSL groups. Obviously, you guys should join the Ask and Tell group. You're a part of it right now. You're a part of this webinar. You should definitely join that group. Look for other groups that are like it, and follow all of the educational groups, societies, associations. you know, immerse yourself into the medical affairs community. You might want to consider following companies, pharmaceutical companies that that hire a lot of MSLs. Large pharma very often will consider folks that don't have prior MSL experience. So follow some of the big boys and see what they're posting. You should definitely follow and engage with key influencers like MSL recruiters and consultants and trainers and you know, folks out there. I can tell you right now that I get, there's tremendous engagement on a lot of my postings, my content, my podcast announcements. And I remember those people. I know that the same people like, comment, and share my podcast announcement every time I put it out. So I remember those people. And I encourage you to do it. And I'm not, believe me, guys, I'm not fishing for likes and comments. I hope you don't look at it that way. That takes care of itself. But I could tell you, though, that's how I remember folks. And that's how engagement starts. But you could take it a step further. When you connect with somebody on LinkedIn and you're now connections, maybe endorse them if they looked at your resume, or if they're helping you out, or they just connected with you and you want to just do something nice. Endorse them for medical affairs, endorse them for oncology, whatever it might be. They'll remember that, and I'm sure they'll appreciate it. If you see that it's their birthday, or if they just celebrated a job anniversary, or switched jobs, congratulate them. That's a great excuse to get out there and stay in front of people. And it's funny, I get this question all the time. How can I get the attention of MSL recruiters? Well, a lot of people got my attention through the engagement on, you know, of my content. And I've developed relationships with a lot of people that way. The other thing that you should keep in mind, and keep this in mind, this is a tip to make note of, and keep this in mind for your whole career. If you're working with a recruiter and you have a relationship with that person, it's not a bad idea to send them an updated CV every like 3, 4, 5, 6 months. If you're working with them, or if you have an active job search going, and you know, you want to stay in front of them, you know, send them an update and just say, you know, dear Tom, you know, hope this message finds you well. Just want to make sure you had my most up-to-date CV. I just made a couple of changes. I really appreciate would appreciate if you can keep me in mind for opportunities that might be a fit. You know, thanks in advance. I appreciate all you do, whatever. It's a very nice, very gracious, very pleasant, very short, succinct, to the point message that's going to keep you in front of them. So that's just a little tip. So we talk about networking a lot when we're looking at this scenario of how you can land your first job as an MSL. Getting a foot in the door is just a huge, huge advantage. So we're going to spend some time talking about networking. And I think my first ever podcast with Amy Misnick on networking is, if I'm not mistaken, I think it's the most downloaded. So this is a big deal. It's important. One of the things that I highly recommend is that you should start by seeking out a mentor or mentors in industry. You want to try to utilize your network of colleagues, peers, classmates, or through LinkedIn. See if you can do it through LinkedIn. The MSL Society and the Medical Affairs Professional Society have mentorship programs. They have a directory. So if you join MAPS and if you join the MSL Society, and I know that these things cost money, but if you join them, there's a tremendous amount of resources available through these groups, but they also have mentorship programs and directories. So that's a very easy way to, again, immerse yourself into the medical affairs community. I would try to connect with MSLs if you can through friends, and see if maybe you can set up a call with them. Some are willing to do that. It's, you know, kind of like an interview, and see if they can give you some advice on how they broke in and what they recommend for your job search and that sort of thing. I would even ask if they would take a look at your resume and offer recommendations. I think it's important to get your resume in the hands of people that are in industry, because when positions become available within their organization, hopefully they can help you by sending your resume in. One of the things that I also recommend, if you have the means, if you have the time, and if you're able to do it, is try to attend industry conferences. I've met so many of you guys. There's people on this webinar right now that I've met several times at medical affairs conferences. The MSL Society does a great job every year with their conference. MAPS does a great job with their conference. There's other, medical affairs specific conferences through other organizations. There's ASH and ASCO, and those are scientific conferences, but they're great for networking. So consider that you can't do enough of this stuff for your career. One of the most important things that I always try to explain to people, that when it comes to networking and you're introducing yourself, whether it's virtually, digitally, online, or in person, is you want to try to shoot for a positive memorable engagement. And what does that mean? That means that you want to try to create a relationship with that person. So when you enter into it, you want to be very tactful. You want to be very gracious. You don't want to go into it and just with and I'm saying this because a lot of people do this to me, is they come in hot and it's like, hey, what can you do for me? Or how can you, I heard you're a really good MSL recruiter. Do you have any leads? Like, man, like, yeah, look, I want to help everybody. You guys know me. I want to help everybody. I really do. But I can tell you there's a soft spot in me for the person that says, dear Tom, hope you're having a great day. Hope you're having a great week. Appreciate all you do for the community. Thanks so much for this. Wanted to see if it'd be okay if we connected. Would it be okay if I sent you my CV? Appreciate it if you can keep me in mind. Like, you want to take a delicate approach, and you want to be memorable in a positive way and leave a positive impression. We all know that you only get one chance to make a first impression, so be careful what that is. And I think that a lot of times, one of the things that I see is there's kind of an awkwardness a lot of times when I'm meeting folks, and you can control that through preparation. Just prepare a script, and practice, and don't just send a quick message on LinkedIn without really proofing it, without making sure that you're taking the right approach. So, it's funny, there's, I remember the positive, memorable engagement, and I remember the really weird ones too. So, and there's a lot in between, but I'm just giving you from my perspective, what I think works. I put together 10 tips for positive and memorable engagement, and I'll run through these really quick, but I think that they're really good. It's very important to be confident, but be humble. Again, be prepared. Know what your elevator pitch is. Know what your brand is. Know what you're presenting. Have a purpose and be tactful in your request. I just gave you different examples. Again, practice and make sure you have your story down. I always think it's really nice to offer a genuine compliment. I don't want to make this disingenuous, but I mean, you really want to show people that you appreciate them, or that you're following along, or and it could be congratulations for anything, or it could just be a compliment on something. But people love that, and it goes a long way, and that helps with the positive, and memorable engagement. Be gracious. So you always want to be thankful in advance. And you really want to be careful not to be too creative, and don't be too eccentric. There's just weird people out there. I'm not going to lie. And I'm not talking about anybody that's on this webinar. I hope not. But there's people that they come off as just too creative. And this is a very, very professional field. The pharmaceutical medical affairs field is very professional. It's high level, it's scientific. You don't want to get too creative with it. I think that when we were talking about LinkedIn, and even outside of LinkedIn, if you could find some mutual ground with somebody, if you can find a connection, something in common, that really goes a long way. I mean, be tactful about it, be sincere about it, but see if you can find some common ground. If you're in person, you see somebody, practice this. You want good business etiquette, eye contact, firm handshake. You always want to look your best. I go to conferences sometimes and I'm scratching my head because I'm like, man, you have such an opportunity here. There's hundreds of people, thousands of people at this conference. And what are you doing wearing those shoes? I'm sorry, but that's your chance to shine. So make sure you look your best. And really, I think there's an art in brevity. I think it's important to not overdo it. Again, when I get these messages, whether it's emails or in mails on LinkedIn, and they're a mile long, it makes me not want to read it. And if you make it short, succinct, to the point, I'll read the whole thing. If you make it too long, I probably won't read any of it. And don't overshare. Don't put too much information in there, because I think it could backfire. All right. So I just did a webinar recently with the Diversity and Medical Affairs Group, DEMA, on engaging with MSL recruiters. So I'm not going to spend that much time on this. That was actually a really good webinar, and you should join that group if you haven't already. It's another good networking organization. I'm doing a podcast tomorrow with one of my recruiters on the same topic, probably a lot of the same information, but it's coming from my recruiter, Dan Herr. It's coming from his perspective. So that's going to be coming out soon. Here's just a couple things. People ask, when's the best time to engage a recruiter? It's always at the beginning of your search. Don't wait. Right at the very beginning of your search, that's when you want to engage with a recruiter. If you are still in school and you haven't graduated yet, well, you want to give yourself enough time, because it takes time to find a job, but you don't want to do it a year in advance, because nobody's going to hire you if you're not graduating until June of 2021 and you're interviewing with them in November. So you have to find that delicate balance. I get the question all the time, what's the best way to identify the right MSL recruiter? I always suggest ask a friend, ask a colleague, ask an industry associate, find MSLs that you know. Hey, who do you recommend? Who would you use? Maybe they had a really good experience with somebody. And, or you could just go on the internet and type in MSL recruiter and you'll see a bunch of us, and, or reach out to me, reach out to one of my recruiters. But, and people say, how do I engage with an MSL recruiter? Well, LinkedIn's the obvious first place to go, but the best way to do it is you want to use that friend, that industry associate, use the name of somebody as a means of introduction. Again, you're going to send a personalized connection request. You're not just going to hit connect. And just be careful. I literally had somebody recently, hey, can you find me an MSL job? Like, dude, put a little more thought and creativity and sensitivity into the whole thing. But maybe it reads something like this. Dear Tom, John Doe suggested I reach out to you as I begin my job search. He mentioned that you're an expert in your field and that you would be an excellent resource. I'm sure you're very busy. I was wondering if it'd be okay if I could share my current resume with you and perhaps set up a brief 5-minute call at your convenience if time allows. Thanks in advance. I mean, how am I going to say no to that? What am I going to say? No, I don't want to work with you. No, don't send me your CV. I may or may not be able to talk to that person at that time, but I could tell you this. If they sent me the CV, what I will do is I will take that CV and I'll share it with my team. I'll get it in our database. We'll start a search and keep them on our radar for when opportunities become available. And now that person's in our network. And then if they reach out again and say, hey, Tom, I share my CV with you. Just wanted to follow up. And I know timing's everything. If you get a few minutes at some point in time with the next couple of weeks, love to make a quick introduction. So that's how you tactfully interact with recruiters. People say to me, well, I reached out to a recruiter, I didn't hear back, or I'm trying to get in touch with these people, or I'm engaged with a recruiter, but they disappeared. Recruiter ghosting's a real thing. I totally understand it is. And I apologize for anybody on my team that's ever ghosted anybody on this webinar. And there's no malice. It's just that we get inundated by requests from job seekers, and it's not just aspiring MSLs, but it's a lot. And sometimes we miss things, or sometimes we're just too busy, and sometimes we're trying to get to everyone. So timing's a big factor in who gets back to you when. But keep in mind that the job of the MSL recruiter is to fill the position that's given to them by their client. It's not to take, as much as I want to take Renee's resume and go and get Renee a job tomorrow, that's really not exactly the way it happens. It's, I go out and work with a bunch of different companies, get a bunch of jobs, and then I have to fill those jobs for the company. And hopefully I can work with Renee at the same time to help her in her job search. So I hope that makes sense. One of the other things that comes up a lot, and I try to recommend to people that, you know, it may make sense, as much as I want everybody to, that's listening right now, to just go from where you are right now, wherever that might be, right into an MSL role. Believe me, I want nothing more. It might not be a bad idea to take a step with one of these like entry-level industry career options that might be a stepping stone to an MSL position. So people ask me, well, what does that look like? What are some of the types of things I want to look for? Well, first and foremost, if you can get a medical affairs fellowship, you're set. Those are really hard to get, but when you get them, it's a great, great stepping stone to an MSL career. I do tell people sometimes you can get a contract MSL position with a company that's building out an outsourced MSL team. That's not a bad option. But you can also consider breaking in through a different department in an entry-level position. So maybe it's like a medical information associate, or a medical education manager, or, you know, associate manager of scientific communications. I'm just throwing like some titles out there. Something in medical writing, clinical research, like a CRA, clinical research associate, medical outcomes, HEOR, medical monitors. Those are all areas that are cousins, and, you know, they're right in the medical affairs space, in the medical affairs community. I think that drug safety, pharmacovigilance, regulatory are distant cousins. They're like second and third cousins. So I don't know if that's the way to go, but I think that if you can find something in these areas, that would be a good way to break in. But I know it's tough, and I know it's going to mean you're taking a sidestep for a year or two, but I can tell you that it works. One of the other things people ask me is, should I go and get a try to get a pharmaceutical sales job before becoming an MSL? I mean, it does happen. I see it. I don't know if that's the best way to go. I think you want to take more of a scientific approach than commercial. Sometimes the transition from commercial to medical affairs is seen as taboo. Not everybody is on board with that thought. So I would probably say no. Do people do it? Can it happen? If there's anybody that's you know, attending this webinar that's on the commercial side, yeah, it happens. And I don't want to discourage you. And you do have industry experience, but you almost always need a doctorate level degree in order to be taken serious, coming from the commercial side to the medical affairs side. So that's another tip. All right, let's get down to business. So we talked about all the stuff that happens before the job search, or a lot of the stuff that happens before the job search. So how do you actually engage in a job search? So I'm going to give you a 3-step process that I think works, and just follow me out on this. And hopefully this will give you an idea of what a good format and a good strategy might be. Let me just check the time here. So I'll go through this pretty quick, so I'll leave time for questions. First thing you want to do, I'm sure everybody's doing this, very, very simple. You go to the internet, you go to Indeed, you go to Simply Hired, you type in medical science liaison, and then wherever your nearest major city is. Or you type in oncology medical science liaison, or whatever the therapeutic area that you're focused on, okay? Very simple. Then you create a spreadsheet. You want to take that spreadsheet and document the positions that you're interested in pursuing. You want to document job title, company, territory, the date it was posted. If you have a contact person, then great. Make note of all that stuff. You want to keep track of where you apply. Very, very important. Now, this is where it all comes together. Before you actually apply to that position, you want to go to LinkedIn and do a search on that company. Then you want to look and see what first connections do you have in that organization. So now this is where it all ties together. when you start your career and you don't have a lot of, connections in your network, you're probably not going to find a lot of people at companies where you're looking for a job. 5 years down the road, when you've been doing this for a while, or when you're looking for a position and you have several thousand people in your network and you do a search in a company, chances are you might know somebody at that company. So then you send them an email, an in-mail, a text, whatever, and say, hey, I'm interested in this position. I just saw it posted on your website. I think I'm a good fit. Would you be willing to get my resume in front of the right hands for the person that's maybe doing the hiring? So now you have a foot in the door. This is the ultimate networking tool. This is how you pull it all together. This is why I'm telling you, the more people you can have in your LinkedIn network, the better a chance that you're going to know somebody at a company in the future. Stay organized, keep track of where you apply. You want to have a history of that. Be careful. Don't apply to everything. Don't apply more than once. Don't over follow up. Be really tactful in your approach, because people keep track of this stuff. Everything's electronic now, so everybody could see what's going on. I'm going to answer this question because it is one of the questions, and I get this all the time. What about training and certifications? If I obtain a certification, will it get me a job as an MSL? There's absolutely no guarantees that any training or certification program will ensure you a job as an MSL. I'm not against training and certification programs. I think that it's a very good part of professional career development. I think it's really good stuff to add to your resume. I think it shows a commitment to the MSL role. I also think it'll help develop skills and prepare you for the role. However, a lot of these things are expensive. And I think that you just need to be careful in what you're making the commitment to. I can let you guys kind of decide from there where you go with this. And, I mentioned before that I am a fan of the MSL Society and MAPS. I think they do a really good job. I'm not that I am against like the ACMA or From Science to Pharma. I like those guys too. I like everybody. I'm totally in the middle with this. I think everybody does a good job in their own right. Some of the programs are a little more expensive than others, but I think, this is something that you have to decide on your own. The biggest question I get, and I think the crux to this whole thing, is how do I overcome lack of experience? This is really probably the most common question I get. And I'm going to break the answer down into kind of three things. Number one, I think that networking is the great equalizer. I think it levels the playing field. I think that if you're able to have a friend or a colleague help you get a foot in the door and get your resume in the hands of the hiring manager, I think it gives you a fighting chance, because then from there, then you get to compete with whoever else is being considered for the position. The other part of it, though, and this goes back to what we talked about before, you really need to match your background and experience and transferable skills on the specific job description that you're interested in pursuing to show them that you have the skill set. So if you look at the job description and it says scientific engagement with oncology, blah, 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 well, and you work in clinical setting in oncology, well, you could put that. If it says dissemination of clinical data and you have that, well, then you use those words and you put those same search terms, same keywords onto your resume or onto your cover letter or both, so that you could show people that you have the skills. I'm very specific about this. I say this all the time. I'm not suggesting that you are documenting something that you cannot support. You have to be able to support what you're documenting. But what I'm saying is be very careful with the way you wordsmith, because that makes the difference between you actually showing that you're a fit and falling short of that. And the last thing, and we talked about this in the beginning, I really think it's important that you prove that you fully understand the role and you can communicate why you want to be an MSL, because it's going to come up. And if you can't be convincing in this piece of it, people aren't going to take you serious. So I think that's it for the slides. Let me stop sharing my screen. And I'll leave it up to you guys. I left about 10 minutes. I can stick around for a little while, but fire away, whatever questions you guys have.
Great, thanks, Tom. That was a lot of really helpful information. So I think to start with questions, we did receive a few in the chat, so I think Renee and I will start by asking you those to get your input. One question from the chat was, can we include willing to relocate in the headline if you're currently in a different geographical location than the position is advertising for?
Totally. I'm a big fan. I think you should definitely do it. I think it helps you and it gives you an advantage because it shows that you don't have to stick in a certain geography. But keep in mind, employers aren't always willing to consider folks relocating into a new territory because it's baggage. It's like, okay, you got to sell your house, or you got to move, you got to pack, you got to, establish yourself in a new area. Maybe you don't know your way around. So it's not ideal, but I would put it.
Thanks. Yeah, actually somebody recently told me if you're planning to relocate already, you could write something like currently relocating to this region if that's where you're applying for a job. Have you seen that before?
Yeah, and that's good too. And if you're relocating and like it's an area that you're familiar with, you have connections, I grew up in the area, I'm just going back there, or that's where I'm from. That's important because people want to know that you know your way around, you have connections, and it's different than just restarting over in a place that you've never been before.
Definitely, yeah. Thanks. So somebody else from the chat asked, what if a recruiter contacts you about a therapeutic field, say neuroscience, that is different from your area of expertise? Say you have a lot of expertise in oncology. Should you apply, or would you not be considered for that role?
So that's an interesting question, because if a recruiter is contacting you about a neuroscience position and you have an oncology background, I'm going to kind of ask why. Like, why are they contacting you for that? It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If there's a reason, if you fit the job description, if you fit the job in some other way, by all means, go for it. But I kind of feel like if you have a background in oncology, especially oncology, because it's so sought after, if you have a background in oncology, I think you should stick to it. But that being said, I'm very sensitive to how hard it is to get opportunities, how hard it is to get a foot in the door. So if for whatever reason that person is giving you an opportunity, I say go for it and check it out. But I would just kind of be curious as to, like, why am I a fit? What angle am I taking? Ask them to guide you as to how you need to go about your search and how you need to position yourself.
Okay, thanks.
All right, another question that somebody asked was, does an MSL recruiter always work for a single company or for many? And they're wondering if it's recommended to work with numerous recruiters at one time.
Good, very good question. Recruiters work for many companies, typically. We have several clients. My team, we might be working on 60 different positions at once for 20 different clients or whatever. So that's the way it works. I definitely think that, especially in the beginning of your career, I think it's important for you to have relationships with more than one recruiter. And I think it's the ethical thing for me to say. I would never say, Lindsay, you can only work with me, because then the pressure's on me. Like, what if I can't find you a job in the right period of time? Like, that's not fair to you. So I would say, yeah, you want to have relationships with different recruiters and recruiting firms. And it's like anything else. You're going to develop better relationships with certain people in certain places. So this is a part of your career that you really need to kind of test out. But I would recommend that you start to develop those relationships.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. We have a couple other recruiter specific questions. Somebody else asked, how likely is it that a recruiter would pursue someone without MSL experience over somebody with MSL experience? So if you're a rookie and you're applying for a position, is it something that the company would tell the recruiting firm, like, hey, we're open to entry level, or is that something that the recruiter themselves would decide?
No, it's like, the rule of thumb is that it always comes from the company. So the company sets the parameters of the search, and then we have to deliver on those parameters. So whatever the requirements are that they give to us, that's why I started off with those 5 things that were most commonly requested, so that I could show you what happens in my world. So I'll get a phone call from a client and they'll say, Tom, I need an oncology MSL in the Southeast, that preferably in Florida, but they have to have at least 3 years of MSL experience and a PharmD. Like, it can get that specific, and they need to be bilingual. True story. We're actually working on a position where that's what they want. So now I can't send, Renee Rotolo's resume in for that position. I'm going to be like, Tom, why are you sending me this resume? But let's just say, for argument's sake, they say, and this is what happens, we have a need in the Southeast, and we'll consider somebody without MSL experience if they have really good oncology, migraine, multiple sclerosis. Like, usually it's pretty specific, and that's why I say science is so important.
Great. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. All right. Another question, a general question that people were wondering about is, have you seen any change in client or candidate numbers since the pandemic began?
I'm going to speak on just our behalf. This is the busiest we've ever been. And I mean, like, we saw a little bit of a blip in March because the whole world ended in March for a short period of time. There was a hiccup in everybody held their breath for like a month. So we saw periods of, I guess, hiring freezes, maybe we'll call them, but that turned around quickly, and now there's a lot of opportunity. Keep in mind, though, there's a very cyclical nature to hiring and recruiting. So you're going to see ups and downs. So if you're out there and you're looking for jobs and you're like, there's no jobs posted now, why can't I find jobs in my area? Well, then I guarantee, like, maybe weeks or maybe a month later, you might look and be like, wow, look at all these jobs. It does happen that way.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like I've heard of, just over the past month, I've seen so many job postings come out compared to 2-3 months ago. So it definitely seems like companies are hiring.
Very cyclical, for sure.
Mm-hmm. I'm sure everyone was hoping we could get through an hour of our lives without bringing up COVID, but it's a little bit impossible right, since it's so relevant. So we're coming to a close here on questions from the chat, but Lindsay and I, typically when we have MSL speakers, we like to ask the same question to everyone as we end, but we've kind of tailored that question a little bit for your session since you have a different role. And we want to ask you, in your opinion, what's the best part about being an MSL recruiter, or what's your favorite part personally?
Well, there's so much for me. I mean, the number one best part of my job is when I present a job offer to a candidate and they're like over the moon thrilled and they accept on the spot. And I know that they hang up the phone and they go and they tell their husband or they tell their wife, and there's a big celebration, and I hang up the phone and I go celebrate with my team. That's the best part of what we do, is when we make that marriage and we're able to get people their dream job. But there's also, I love this. I love being able to create relationships with people that I don't know, that I'm helping, and, I make a difference in their career. And I know that sounds sappy, but the reason I started the podcast is because I just didn't have enough time to talk to everybody. I just don't. There's not enough hours in the day. There's thousands of you guys, thousands. And I want to help every one of you. And I want to talk to every one of you, but I just can't. I don't have enough time. But that doesn't mean that I can't provide the content that I think is important for you guys to position yourself to be the one on the other end of that phone that's getting the job, that's accepting it, that's going back and telling their family. So that's why I do it.
That's very encouraging. We're getting a lot of thank yous and words of encouragement coming through the chat. I think everyone was really happy to hear you say that.
Yeah. And I'm being sincere. Look, I like to make a lot of money, and there's that too. I like to drive a nice car, but that's a whole nother thing. That's a different motivation. You know,
that's for our next
I'm not gonna lie. I like nice things, so I work hard.
Definitely. Yeah, that all makes a lot of sense. Well, we wanted to take a minute just to thank you, and thank you for taking this hour out of your afternoon and your busy schedule to help all of us. I think we've had many, many thank yous coming through from our 90-something participants. This has been our biggest crowd, so we want to thank you for that too, and helping us get the word out there. And yeah, just overwhelmingly, lots of words of thank you.
Well, thank you guys for what you're doing, because I think you're doing a great job. And Jordan and the other guys in your crew, Lindsay, you guys are doing just a phenomenal job. And what everybody that's on this webinar, like, this is the stuff that you should be doing. This is what you should be doing. And I think that it might seem futile at times and you might get frustrated, but you put these pieces together and then you'll start to get little victories. And the next thing you know, you'll be considering job offers, and I'll get that. And I want that message. I want to hear from you guys. Like, I want that message, that email or that email that says, Tom, guess what? I just accepted a position at Novartis or whatever. And believe me, that's one of the things that, is going to put a smile on my face the same way that if I placed you at a client. So I'm grateful for you guys. Thank you for this opportunity. Thank you, everybody that subscribes to my podcast. Thank you. I really appreciate it. Like I said, follow me on Instagram, or the MSL Talk podcast on Instagram and YouTube. We got a lot of really awesome content coming out, a lot of more stuff, a lot of video. Unfortunately, you have to see me now, which, but what else can we, I can't, I'm trying to get the message out. So.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, thanks everybody. Stay in touch, listen to the podcast, stay in touch for our webinar series coming up, and yeah, connect with everyone on LinkedIn.
Good stuff. Good luck, guys.
Thank
All
you,
right.
Tom.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you again.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.